We're just worried. Why? I'm fine.
Well, you're not acting fine.
Huh? Where's Ian, Gracie?
Is that Ian's phone that Becca found?
Why doesn't he have it with him? Why was it hidden?
Is there something you haven't told us?
What are you saying?
We're not saying anything.
Well, we are.
No, we just need to know what's going on. We're nervous.
We're worried, is all.
Why did you say that Ian was golfing to the guards?
Grace, there's blood on some clothes in the washing machine. There's a cut in your hand.
I smashed the cop.
Did something happen
With Ian.
All his stuff is still here.
I think you should go now.
No, we just need you to listen, okay? We won't judge you, Gracie. We love you. But if something happened with Ian...
I think you
please
should
just
leave.
tell us.
Now,
Look,
please.
will you just listen?
Just get away from me!
Sharon Horgan, welcome back to Bullseye.
Hi, how's it going?
It's also a very funny show.
It is. It's both. But that was intense. That got me.
I'm so glad to have you back on the show. How did you end up working on this particular project? It's a remake of a European show.
Yeah.
So how did you land on it?
Well, in actual fact, it was brought to me. I was lucky enough to have that happen. Jay Hunt, who was sort of my boss at Channel 4 when Rob and I were making Catastrophe, she moved over to Apple, and then and in actual fact, post Catastrophe, I was trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do, and so she said, "Let's meet," and she was like, "Well, I think you should do this." And so she sent me all the episodes, and I genuinely had no interest in doing a remake of something, and I'd never written hour long, didn't know anything about writing thrillers, and but I watched one episode, and I was kind of in from that one episode, and you know, then you go through all the usual rigmarole of having to write a pilot script, and then, you know, another script, and then trying to get casting, and then finally it got commissioned. And yeah, I'm so grateful that it happened like that, because I would never have done it. You know, I figured I was just, you know, I'd sort of cut my groove of half hour and, you know, relationship based half hour, and but no, it's great. It's great to be taken out of your comfort zone. It's really creatively a good idea.
What was the tone like in the original?
God, it's really interesting. I'd love you to see it, actually, because in a lot of ways it was great. You know, the sisterhood was there. You know, they had their own and their hate for him and his odiousness, and you know, their attempts at killing him. But it was kind of wild. It was sort of you know, there was a lot more murder attempts in the original, and it was kind of, there was Chinese mafia involved, and there was, you know, hitmen, and dead people ended up in dog food canning factories, and so it was way more heightened, but really they still did that thing where, you know, the comic moments sat right beside really kind of difficult moments, and they just told the story in a very different way, and probably perfect for a Belgian audience, you know. I think what I was drawn to was the premise, because I thought it was an inherently kind of funny, interesting premise, and the idea of, you know, 5 kind of fairly ordinary women having to do this extraordinary thing and being very bad at it, you know, just being very bad at murder, I thought was very funny. and you know, sort of like kind of cartoony in some ways. But what I was really drawn to was the sisters' relationship and how everything they did to try and save their sister ended up sort of, they kind of lost a piece of themselves in doing it, you know, like the collateral damage of trying to get rid of this awful human. All of that to me was way more interesting than the, you know, the caper of sort of trying and failing to kill someone.
I mean, It seems like the reason I ask is it would be so easy to have this premise, which is like, sisters band together to do a murder cavalcade of murder attempts. And it would be very easy for that to be like, a Pink Panther movie.
Yeah.
Or it would be very easy for it to be like sophisticated camp.
Yes, I agree. It was a bit Pink Panther, the original. But I mean, the tone is, it's really movable at the start of any project, and then you kind of have to pick a lane. And, I did feel very comfortable, even in my sort of sitcom work, with tragedy sitting beside very, very closely to the comedy. So I knew that I could sort of do that. I knew I could do something ridiculous and follow it up with something really terrible and brutal and hard to look at kind of thing. And it's just, you just have to get an audience to trust you, I suppose, and for there to be a kind of balance in performance, and you can't suddenly have this wild, crazy, like that's a character from something else. I mean, you can do that in some things, but usually the tone has to be consistent, in terms of performance, and then you can kind of go a bit wild.
Do you have siblings yourself?
Yeah, I've got 2 brothers, 2 sisters. So same size family as the Garveys, just different sexes, different makeup.
Have you ever murdered anyone with them?
No, we've definitely thought about it, talked about it. We would definitely. I mean, in a hypothetical, would you do that for each other? I've definitely been in situations where I've asked my brothers to help me out a little.
Really?
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling embarrassed that I've never helped anyone out in that. I guess I'm not who you would ask.
Well, I think we're incredibly tight, and our own best friends. So I felt like there's something about that large family dynamic that I had, I felt like I was able to translate, hopefully, onto screen. And so the sort of, the would you kill for your brother and sister? I mean, no, I probably wouldn't kill for them. But if it was if it really had to be done, and I had to, step in there, and it was a no choice situation. I don't know. It's very, very hypothetical. But like, I know how it feels to feel passionately about family and want to protect them. And I also know how it feels to party hard with them.
What are the things about siblings talking to each other, other than literally planning murders, that you wanted to capture in the show?
Well, I think there's a really interesting dynamic that happens with a large family, because you have sort of, separate. You have your dynamic as a 5 in our case, as the Horgan family, not the Garvey family, and then you have you sort of like other allegiances within that 5. Like my eldest sister is the kind of matriarch of us, and she's in fact godmother to my littlest brother. There's 13 years between them, I think.
Is that allowed?
It is in Ireland.
Okay.
The eldest kid always sort of looked after the youngest. Well, that was my experience and experience of my friends' families. Everyone came from big families where I was from, and so my younger brother and my middle brother are, have their sort of thing, their own kind of special relationship and dynamic, and then the sisters have their own separate one, and there's a kind of, there can be jealousies, there can be feelings of being left out a bit at times, and arguing, and extreme camaraderie, and protectiveness, and then, like, when we were all together, the thing that I feel or hope I captured was that thing of, like, nothing else kind of matters, and that's why, the JP character in Bad Sisters is, I mean, he's terrible and awful in so many ways, but he's also he's an outsider, he's been sidelined. He's, like, tried to find a way into this family and he just couldn't get in. And so he's going to, remove Grace from it and isolate her. And so that I experienced that, or a version of that, with my brothers and sisters, that when we come together, we'd much rather just talk to each other than anyone else. There's so much shared history and stories and jokes and, shorthand, that, it's very addictive. And so that was some of the dynamic that I kind of wanted to bring to the screen.
I mean, in Bad Sisters, like, Jean Paul has committed all of these sins against the family of various kinds. I mean, there's a million reasons that he's a jerk, but really the inciting incident of the whole thing is not, is not the, like, what I would think of as the worst things, like the crimes that he's committed. It's that he has kept his wife, Grace, and daughter from participating in a family ritual, which is Christmas Day jumping in the ocean.
Yes. Him. No, it like, the thing is like, it's how you sort of tell the story and how much you give away at the start, and what you build towards, because you have to keep an audience on side, not just hating this man, but being behind these sisters. So it had to build, that the crimes had to sort of get worse. And then you realize, as you get closer to the end of the show, all the everything that had happened to these sisters, fueled that initial kind of decision, and yes, it seems like a sort of relatively minor thing, but when he stops her from going, the sisters have already said out loud, that we're losing her, she's getting smaller and smaller. And it's a scary thing when you think, because sometimes there's no way back. You sort of condition someone to such an extent that they do sort of lose who they are or who they were, and it's sort of stopping it from getting to that point. And it's it's like a wish fulfillment that in real life you never really get to experience, but it's nice to get to do it through some characters on the telly.
Were there any incidences of violence amongst your siblings?
I used to torture my younger brothers. And I only remembered it, like, actually it was probably about 10 years ago. My little brother Mark reminded me. We had this driveway that led up to the house, and it was covered in those, little sort of jagged stones, all the way down to the front gate. Our house was on that sort of man-made hill. And so I used to run along the grass, hold his hand and run along the grass while he ran along the stones all the way down to the gate. He would just be shouting and screaming. But I think he liked it. I mean, that my memory is, you know, it was kind of like, you know, when you tickle someone so hard, it's painful. I mean, you know, that kind of thing. It's like, maybe he did hate it. Maybe I'm just reasoning around it. But yeah, that's the only violence I can remember. My dad used to teach boxing in the local village hall to local kids, and he would bring home, you know, the gloves and the headgear and all of that stuff, and so we would you know, put it all on and stage fights. But that was really just for my dad's amusement. It wasn't really, there was no beef. It was just like a fun thing.
That was just your dad as a Roman emperor.
Kind of was, yeah. Yeah.
Did you throw punches in those?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I loved it.
Did your father teach you punches? I mean, do you know cross from a hook?
Well, you know, yes, I do. But like he had all the equipment, like, you know, the punching bag and the skipping rope. Like I learned like boxers skip, and like it was a whole thing. We watched a lot of boxing when we were kids as well. Like, you know, when you a big memory is sort of staying up late for those big sort of prize fights, and like the one time you're allowed stay up until 2 a.m. or whatever when it would be eventually televised on Irish TV. But yeah, it's funny.
Had he fought himself?
Yeah, like amateurly, and my little brother Mark kind of got into it at university, you know. Yeah.
At university?
Yeah, you can do like intervarsity, like
Boxing
championship. Not that he studied it there, but you know, it's like a kind of like Americans in football, I guess.
Okay, so he did it in a he was on like the boxing team or something. It wasn't like a intramural sport. Like I played softball, like slow pitch softball in college with my friends against other groups of people.
I don't know if I'm as fully informed on the whole intervarsity boxing championship as I should be, but I guess I wasn't expecting it to come up. I know he's very good.
Sorry, I was like, I don't know. I did sketch comedy in college. I hosted a college radio show. I can't tell you.
I know.
I never hit anybody in my life, Sharon.
I think it could be good for you.
Do you?
Yeah. Not.
That?
I mean, you know, maybe with a punching bag, not an actual person, but yeah, it's good. You know, you kind of relieve stress and you know, get a lot out of you.
One of the things that I have a hard time watching in television is, I mean, like, I'm not talking about in like a Jackie Chan movie or something, but in a show that involves badassery, if it's relatively grounded and somebody gets killed, that killing, if it's, you know, made righteous by the narrative of the show, is purely redemptive in the world of the show, right? Like, you killed the bad guy, so we solved the bad problem, and that is the end of that narrative. We have ended it with success, right? And it seems to me like one of the things you were interested in interrogating was the fact that killing the source of trauma is not a purely redemptive act. It is an additional trauma.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
It may or may not be better than the alternative, but it doesn't fix everything.
Oh, exactly. And in sort of, you know, researching it and doing like reading and watching and listening, you know, women who kill their partners, who end up in prison because of it, don't even necessarily stop loving them, let alone, are rid of the trauma or in a better place or any of those things. And so, yeah, I mean, that was exactly it. And also, the sense of getting away with it. Like, what the hell does that mean? When you've taken the life of your child's father, getting away with it is, doesn't even come into it really. I mean, it does in that she wants to keep her daughter safe and protected and to have a life, but she's riddled with it. It's second scene of the show is her dreaming and the reenactment of what happened with her new partner, and like the trauma is all there. And for the most part, people who've been through something awful like that don't always get the support that they need, if ever. They're not necessarily seen as victims. They're seen as the criminal, and they are interrogated, and they are put in a situation where they kind of wish they'd never said anything, and I know this is a slightly different case scenario, but when the cops start looking into it, you can see that they are honing in on catching the baddie, i.e. Grace, but what about the situation that surrounds it? And then, so I was like really interested in that, but then also like deeply interested in looking at the sort of the flaws within the institution that is the police, and how often those people who are there to protect us are the ones we need to be protected from, because the bad eggs, they don't get, I'm trying to have so many mixed metaphors here, but they don't get plucked out. They stick around because it's so hard to remove them, and so it's so hard to sort of change the old guard. And when new blood comes in and you think a change is possible, it's like it's this massive behemoth that is really hard to change the direction of. And so yeah, I can tell by how much I'm sweating that I'm still like it still really makes me angry. And that was kind of some of the stuff that was going on in the first season that was upsetting me, that I kind of thought could be good to talk about through these characters in the show.
I agree entirely. I'm also concerned from your passion that you may be planning to murder a person or some people.
I'm so weirdly, do you know what? I'm so weirdly less angry than I used to be. It's so, I mean, I'm chilled. I just love, I get excited about talking about story, and I do think it's an amazing thing to get to talk about difficult subjects through like entertainment. It's different. It's different to watching the news or to watching a hard-hitting documentary or something like that. You get to, people relate to these characters because they're like their family or their friend, and so I think they sort of receive messages in a different way. So yeah, that sort of, I'm not going to kill anybody.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Do you find it harder or easier to be funny when you're writing about something you're upset about?
Oh God. It depends on the character. Like each character has a different response to something bad happening, And so within that scene, you can do it all. You can have, you can have BB say something that's wrong but pedantic. You can have Ursula freak out. You can have Eva just try and do the right thing. You can have Becca say something ridiculous. So I find it sort of you know, anger's great, but at a certain point, you don't ever want to feel like you're soapboxing, you know, and it's kind of great to have that many characters to sort of tell the story through, because you can be all the things, funny and mad and sad and bad.
Glad?
Glad. Wish I'd said glad. Yeah.
You've made some shows about really big things, right? Like your biggest successes and most recent shows. I mean, you made Pulling, that was about dating and finding love. You made Catastrophe, that was about all of the sort of underbelly of having a child, in a very charmingly and hilariously, but reasonably darkly as well. You know, you made a show about divorce, and this is a show about, and the show about divorce was very much about divorce. It was about the most painful parts of divorce. And this is a show about trauma and violence against women. What's it like to put that out into the world? Like, it's one thing to put Pulling out into the world and have people come up to you and be like, I tried to find a nice boyfriend when I was 32, and I also had these mishaps occur, and they relate to it because of the real feelings in the show. It's very different to put something into the world about abuse. And so what was it like to have done that, or made divorce about divorce, and received the world's feelings about it?
It's interesting, you know, because like Pulling was also in its own way, you know, about, you know, just this incredible dissatisfaction that can happen in your 30s when you haven't got what you want, when you haven't met the right person, when you have an awful job, when you're living in low-level shared accommodation, and you know, it's about drinking too much, it's about making mistakes, and it's, you know, a lot of which I'd sort of gone through. So in a way, and even with Catastrophe, you know, it's, yeah, you know, about having kids, but it's also about how hard it is to sort of stay in love when you do have kids, and all the dark, hard stuff that comes from just like regular life, you know, death, alcoholism, you know, but they were things I'd lived, and I think with Bad Sisters and divorce, well, certainly I'm divorced now, but at the time I wasn't, and so I was trying to represent a story I hadn't yet lived. And while there was, you know, the idea was that, I guess, if you've been married, you know what it's like to want a divorce, but you know, the sort of all the darkness that goes with it. I could be so forensic now, by the way. I mean, I could absolutely give a whole new shade to that. But
I mean, Sharon, there's this question. Ira Glass and the people at This American Life made this comic book called How to Make Radio, I think it's called. And there's a question that I'm going to say Alex Chadwick, one of the NPR legends, I think it was Alex Chadwick, suggests in that comic book as always an appropriate question, no matter what the interview is. And the question is, what did you think it was going to be like? How did it turn out to be? And how do those compare? And like, you made a show about divorce and then became divorced.
I know. How do those compare?
What did you think it was going to be like? What did it turn out to be like? And how did they compare?
Well, I can... wow. A lot less funny, as it turns out. Yeah. A lot less fun characters. A lot less reasonableness. But, you know, It's all good.
Sharon, Sarah Jessica Parker is a very appealing on-screen presence.
Absolutely.
But so are you.
Aw.
So are you.
Thank you so much. But listen, Bad Sisters wise, it was scarier because, you know, I haven't been in that situation, and I felt like an enormous responsibility. And I was really anxious that, you know, like we were talking about earlier, just tonally we were doing something that was, you know, at the one hand heightened caper, and on the other hand trying to represent something that, you know, you wouldn't wish on anyone. And I just you know, I just had to do my best with the story and hope that I was representing it well. And also, I guess, because it was a kind of abuse that hadn't really I couldn't think of any sort of TV show that had dug into like coercive control or financial control or that kind of thing, that sort of isolating of a person within a relationship. And so it was scary. But the thing is like those stories are, it's really important to put them out there, and it's important to be really just be as truthful and honest as you can, and then you know, put the work in, and yeah, not be too scared of it, I think. And then people responded. I mean, the messages I got were really, really heartbreaking, awful. But there is something, like we were saying, there is something about seeing your story on screen and finally going, oh, you know, that's what I was in. I didn't know what it was. That's exactly what it was.
Was this always going to be an Irish show?
No, actually. It was, Apple sort of left it up to me and to, you know, the guy or everyone involved in making it. They were like, you know, set it in the UK, set it in Ireland. And so I figured out pretty quickly that it should be an Irish show, though. And it was slightly inspired by the original. You know, it felt like a very sort of close-knit place. And I like the idea of it being everyone knowing everyone's business, or, you know, the idea of John Paul being an outsider, not just in the family, but on the island. You know, it's hard to break through, you know, in Ireland. My dad was a New Zealander, and we sort of moved there quite late, and we were always considered blow-ins, you know, and lots of other things. Like, I wanted to use places I went to as a child that were memories to sort of help, you know, create this world. And then the big thing was like doing like reconnaissance of you know, where we wanted to film and find, and the 40-foot. And I'd never been there, I'd never swam there, but I'd seen you know, I've seen footage of it, and everyone going there on Christmas Day, and like big hangovers from the night before, and plunging into that cold water, and I saw these sort of older women, a lot of older people go and swim there, and just saw these older women just swimming in this Baltic water, just chatting, like just shooting the breeze, and I just thought that could be a great place to plot a murder. And you know, the sound of the sea against the rocks, and the water, and the wildness, and then it just felt like it sort of had to be, you know, there were so many things that felt right. And I got excited about putting Ireland on screen, or you know, my version of Ireland, you know, modern Ireland. And I'd never got a chance to do that before. Even in Catastrophe, we had my Irish family, my character's Irish family, but we never shot there. Like, I don't know, it was in Essex or somewhere pretending to be Ireland. And so, yeah, I just love the thought of finally getting to work there.
Sharon, I'm really grateful for your time. It's always really nice to get to talk to you.
It's great talking to you too.
I admire your show and you and your work so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.